Good afternoon, everyone. Let's just go ahead and hop right in. In this session, we're going to be covering some basics on how to schedule reports in both Cognos 10 and 11. As you know, in between Cognos 10 and 11, the UI has changed quite a bit. So I figured we would cover both the old and new versions just to cover all of our bases there. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. So when you log into Cognos 10, this is the screen that you're going to see. You should be able to see the user that you're logged in as, and from there you should be able to go into My Folders or Public Folders to reach the reports that you're interested in scheduling. Once you get here, you can drill down into the folder that has the report that you want to schedule, and from there, go ahead and schedule the report. In this case, we're going to be working with this 7.6 switch port status report. And so to begin with, if you look over here on the right, you're going to be able to see this icon here. It's the schedule icon, and from there, you're going to be able to schedule the report. So let's go ahead and click on it. And so after you click on it, you're going to be able to determine the frequency that this schedule is going to cover. Typically, the by week is the most commonly used. If you do it by day, one thing to keep in mind is that the data warehouse typically only gets updated once per day during the nightly ETL. And so if you do it by day, you're just going to be getting the same data sent to you over and over. But you know, if you do have an ETL on, that occurs more than once per day, you might be able to, get an updated report a few times per day. But typically, you're just going to want to use by week, and from there, you're going to be able to specify the days in that week that you're going to want to receive that report. At the top right, this is important to keep in mind. This is the actual time that the report is going to get sent out. And so you can select the specific date, and then in here, if you want to receive it in the early morning, you can specify that to AM, so that, every Wednesday currently at 7 a.m., starting on the 29th. In this case, we'll probably want it to start on the 26th. On the 26th, so that would start today, this morning. Of course, this is already passed, but, going forward, it'll start every day at 7 a.m. On the ending time, if you select no end date, it'll just go forth, as long as you want it to. If you want it to end on a specific date, you can do that. Otherwise, just keep the no end date. Another thing to keep in mind is once you get your schedule set up, you will want to come down here and override the default report options so that you're going to be able to specify the formats that you receive the report in and how it's delivered to you. One other thing I'll cover briefly here is the priority. If you happen to have multiple reports that run at the same time, that is when the priority will come into effect. Other than that, you probably won't really need to use it much. So as we look down here, you're going to be able to see currently by default, the HTML format is going to be selected. And when it's delivered, you can also specify the number of rows that are on the page. I believe in the report, if you have it set to return a certain number of rows, that'll override this value. But let's go ahead and just select several of these different formats. One thing to keep in mind with the PDF is if, depending on the report, if it's quite wide, you might be able to, or want it to show up as landscape. You can change that there. Select whatever formats you want. And then over here, as you're wanting to have it sent to you by email, which is the most common, you would just go ahead and select send a link to the report by email. Another option as well is to save the report as a report view, which is basically just the output of the report saved in a format that you would basically see in the report folder that we browsed to earlier to get to this report. And you wouldn't be able to modify it or anything. It would just be the result set of the report. That's a little bit less common, but definitely something you can do. With the email, which is the most common, that's where we're going to spend most of our time here. So after you select the send a link to the report by email, you would click on edit the email options. And in here, you can put in however many email addresses you want, separated by semicolons. You can see that at the top here if you forget. And one other thing to keep in mind is by default, when you include a link to the report and that's checked, it's just going to have a link in the body of the email. And you can also click on attach the report to the email, and that would also, beyond having the link in the body, it would attach the report to the email. So if you had PDF, Excel selected as a format, you would get those two versions attached to the report. One thing to keep in mind, and this would go into possibly the troubleshooting if you have any issues with an email being sent out to you, would be if the output of the report is too big for your email server, and that could be due to those attached reports to the email, that could cause a problem depending on the SMTP server settings, if it only allows attachments of a specific size. So just keep that in mind. So we'll go ahead and click OK. One other thing to keep in mind as well is if the report that you are scheduling has a prompt, if it has a prompt page or a prompt on the actual page of the report so that you can filter it down. You can also pre-filter the report using these prompt values. And so this specific report does have a prompt page. So let's go ahead and see what happens here. So when you click on edit the prompt details, you can see that in this report, we're able to select the status of the switch or the port, and that'll automatically filter the contents of the report when it is scheduled. And so let's finish that. And so you can see here that it's automatically going to select the SFP not present option. And so when you get that report, this is the only status that's going to be in the contents of the report. So let's just go ahead and click OK. And so once you do that, you're going to be taken back to this page where we first saw the report. And there's a couple of different ways to be able to see the schedule of the report. So as you can see here, we're logged in as admin. A lot of times you might be logged in as your own Active Directory user or whatever in Cognos. For that specific user, what you can do is click on this icon here and go to My Activities and Schedules. And you should be able to see all of the reports that were scheduled by that specific user. So in this case, we're able to see that 7.6 report in there. We can see past activities, past reports that were run and their status. And we're also able to see the upcoming schedule. And in this case, if we look down at the schedules, we're able to see this report that we modified today. And you can also take a look at the schedule that you created here by modifying it. And so you should be able to go in here and see all of the options that we selected. And if you want, you can modify it from here. This makes it a lot easier to work with your schedules rather than having to browse to the report and then modify the schedule from there. You can just see all of your schedules in one spot and then be able to do the modifications. One other thing that you can do from here is click the little blue arrow and you can run the schedule once just to make sure that it works. And so in this case, when you click on run the schedule once, you can modify your options here, or you can just immediately run it. And after you do that, you can go up to current activities and you should be able to see the new report that's going to be executed. And immediately afterwards, you should see it executing. And in this case, we are running into a problem, and that's something that we'll discuss here shortly when we get to how we can troubleshoot some of these reports. And so let's go ahead and go back to the home page here. And so one other place that we can look at to look at all the schedules that we have in place would be under the IBM Cognos administration. A lot of times the user that you have logged in might not have access to the IBM Cognos administration page, but typically if you are an admin, you should be able to have access to this page. And this is another spot to look at your schedules, except it's going to be all of the schedules that are set up in the environment regardless of the user. So you can see here that this was another user and they scheduled this report. So now we're able to see all the different things that are scheduled in the environment, and we should then be able to, look at the schedule, look at the run histories, see all of that information that we need to see to be able to, manage all of the schedules in the environment. So let's go ahead and go back to the home page one more time, and I just wanted to cover one other thing that you can do with these reports in terms of scheduling. So if we go back to this reports page and we see this 7.6 report, one thing to keep in mind was if we went back to the schedule and we looked at the prompt values here and we see all the different options, you would notice that when we first scheduled this report and we selected a specific switch port status, that status is just one out of many different things that you could have selected. And so one way to be able to have multiple schedules look at different prompt values would be to do the following. What you would do is you would go to More, and then what you can do here is create a report view of this report. And I think there's also an icon out here, which is this one right here, create a report view of this report. And when you create this report view, you can give it whatever name you want, tell it where you want it to be stored. And this version of the report looks like I already created one, so in this case, let's just call it one report view. And so you're going to see the report view above the original version, or in the folder by whatever name you give it. So if you look at the right, you're going to see that there's far fewer options available to work with this specific report. And essentially, it's just a new version of this original report, but it's non-editable. And so essentially, you're just going to be using that to create a different schedule. So for instance, if you wanted that specific version of the report, the one that we prompted for just that one specific value to be sent to a specific subset of people, you would have one report view for those people, and then you would create a whole new schedule on your next report view for a different audience, and then from there you could set up a totally different prompt and be able to have a different result set to the different audience. And so in this case, for a switch port status, some of these options probably aren't the biggest deal, but depending on the report, let's say you had a report that was based on specific tenants or business units, you'd be able to create a report view for one specific tenant and have it be scheduled to send out on a regular basis to that specific customer, and then you could create a new report view for another customer and change how it's filtered. And so this is something that can be very useful as well in terms of scheduling reports. So I just wanted to make sure to point that out. So in terms of Cognos 10, that's pretty much it. There are a few other things that I'll come back to once we take a look at Cognos 11, because there are a few things that are pretty much the same between the two versions. So let's go ahead and take a look at Cognos 11 here. So as you can see, let's just reload this. The UI is totally different from Cognos 10, and so that's one reason why we wanted to make sure to touch on this in this video here. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So just like in Cognos 10, we do still have the My Content, and instead of the public folders, we see Team Content. So let's go ahead and take a look in here. So in this case, we're going to look in this folder, and once again, we see the 7.6 switch port status report. And from here, what we're going to need to do is click on the three dots, the ellipses, and go to Properties. And under Properties, this third tab, you select that for the schedule, and then click on New. And so once again, you're going to have the same options, just in a little bit of a different view. So in this case, we're going to select the weekly. We're going to have the start time of today, 2/19, end time 3 months away. In this case, we don't really want it to stop. You can select however many days once again. If you wanted to have it repeat on those specific days, every hour, between certain times, or even down to the minute, you can. But like I said, with the ETLs in the data warehouse, the data is really not going to change, except if you have it, the ETL happening multiple times per day. So once again, in the format, you can select all the different formats that you want to see. We'll click Done. And so in here, it's very easy to see which options you've selected. Under Delivery, once again, we can select Send the report by email, attach the report to the email, and then put in your email address. Once you press Enter, it should create a little box there so you can tell that it's a valid email address. And if we go down here, click Done. Once again, with the set values, if you click Set, if the report has a prompt page or some prompt values that are available to select, you should be able to put those in here. So in this case, this is a different database, and so there are different options. So in this case, we select No Light. It will filter the report output just by what we selected. Once again, with the PDF, you should be able to change the different options for the PDF. Landscape, the paper size, if you need it to have a password, if it's a little bit more sensitive. Once you've done that and you click Create, you should see the schedule show up very neatly right here. From this page, you can also disable the schedule that you just created. I usually, once you create your schedule, I usually never even come back to this tab, just because there's easier ways to manage all your schedules. So let's just leave it enabled. And from here, just like the previous version, you do have a spot here for that specific user where you can manage your schedules. So if we go here, you can see that for this admin user, we do have all of these different reports scheduled. And you can see down here the one that we just scheduled. We can see where that report is stored. If you do happen to want to go back to team content and go to that actual folder, you can. Otherwise, you can just click the ellipses over there and you can modify the schedule, run it, disable, remove it, set the priority. So it's a lot easier to work with your schedules from here rather than having to drill into each report, especially when you have dozens of schedules to work with or keep track of. So let's go ahead and move on from there and go back to the administration console. So just like in the Cognos 10, if you go to Manage and Administration Console, it's going to give you the exact same view that you had in the previous version. You're going to be able to see what's happened in the past, and you're also going to be able to go down to upcoming activities, what's coming up, and then take a look at all your schedules once again and manipulate them that way. And so let's go ahead and move on to how you would do some basic troubleshooting on these reports. So let's go ahead and work from here. Once you get to look at the reports that have happened in the past, let's just take a quick look. You can see here under the status, you can see succeeded, succeeded. Whenever one fails, it should say failed, or if you canceled it, you should be able to see that. What you can do is click the little drop down and go to View Run History Details. And you can see here an error message of why the report didn't run. And most of the time you should be able to just do a quick Google search on these and be able to get an idea of why it failed. And let's see, let's go back here. Another thing that we're probably going to see if we go back to current activities, you can see a lot of these reports are in a waiting status. This is indicative of usually two issues that I see quite often. The first one is if the report itself has attachments that, or the email that's trying to be sent out, if it has report attachments that are very large, it's possible that we're waiting to hear back from the SMTP server saying that, the the attachments are too big and eventually it will fail. More often, the reason why we're seeing this waiting is because we don't have the mail server set up correctly to begin with. So when you are initially setting up the mail server to deliver reports, this is where you would do that. So this IBM Cognos configuration tool, you can find that just by pulling up the start menu, typing in IBM. You should be able to find that. Once you get this pulled up, if you go down to notification, fourth from the bottom, you're going to be able to see the SMTP mail server details, and you can see here that we just put in mail server, and that's just the default value. And obviously that's not pointing to an actual mail server. So what needs to be done is put in your actual mail server details, leave on the :25. So whatever that happens to be for you. And you can also, if your mail server requires a username and password, you can set that up. Majority of the time you don't need to worry about it. One thing to keep in mind is this default sender is going to be shown when these reports are sent out. If you have another sender that you want to have included, you can go ahead and change that. Sometimes certain SMTP servers will just deny from unknown senders, so you might need to change this to something specific to your environment. One other thing to keep in mind in this IBM Cognos configuration would be under Actions, and it didn't like what I put there, but we'll go to Actions, Edit Global Configuration, and so you can see here that the server time zone is listed as Eastern Time, and that is correct based on what this VM time is set to. But so just keep in mind, if you have this server time zone set to something that's not accurate to the server and you set up a schedule on the server, that schedule is probably going to be incorrect. So like if you set it to be 10 a.m. Eastern Time to run, and yet the server time zone is GMT, and the server time zone is set to GMT, then most likely it's going to run at GMT +0 and not the Eastern Time. So just make sure you have this set to whatever you want it to actually be, and the report should run when you expect it to. So just keep that in mind. One other thing that you're going to need to do after you set up the notification, in this case, I didn't actually set up a mail server, but you're going to want to save and then click on the restart. And the restart is just going to restart all the IBM Cognos services, and by doing that, it'll actually have this notification information that we just set up take effect on the server. Otherwise, you could set it up and you still won't be able to send out emails from Cognos. So just keep that in mind as well. And so let's go back just real quick. I think it was over here, under the past activities. So I just wanted to emphasize one more time that to view the run history details, you would just click the blue arrow down, view run history details, and you should be able to see when the reports are successful or not. In this case, since we are sending them via email, you will see a message in here that will say waiting to send an email. So like if we went it back up to the current activities, and we did the view run history details, you can see here that there are email messages waiting to be sent. And then when you have the correct email specified in the IBM Cognos configuration, you will then, right after this, see that it was successful. And I think that's pretty much it.